Tanya, your friendly moderator for this session. And I'm going to allow these two lovely people to introduce themselves. We'll start on my right.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexandre Nossi, nicknamed Pomf. I began 5 years ago with a YouTube channel about gaming and commentating, yes. And we built a company called O Gaming, and now we broadcast gaming content on IPTVs to between 2.5 million people to up to 4 million people every month that come to watch pro players play and compete in competitive gaming. And we also have offline shows which can be compared to maybe something close to Super Bowl. Well, that's what we try to reach on our level, and yes, that's pretty much it.
Wonderful, thank you. And over here, Lisa.
My name's Lisa. I'm a content maker and I'm a massive music fan, and I've been making content for about 15 years now. My first TV commission as an EP and a creator was a music series called Stay Tuned that got sold to 30 countries, and it was the first multi-platform kids show in Australia. And I have worked with bands and labels and brands with music for the last 10 years. I'm now living in London, working with digital agencies, working with a startup called Rocket Digital, and I'm also still producing music documentaries.
Wonderful, thank you. So earlier we were discussing the future of platforms and whether or not, in fact, it isn't about necessarily developing content for a specific platform, but more about the brand and the IP itself, in as much as we have this new generation of digital natives who don't particularly care where they see the content, so long as they're seeing the content. So let's talk a little bit more about your thoughts on that. Let's start with you, Lisa.
Well, I was talking to someone about this the other day, that I think as content makers, we're referring to platforms more than our audiences are. I think when you've got brands like X Factor, or you've got brands that are entertainment properties, the audience or our fans or our users we're trying to engage are coming at it from what concept or what creative it's providing us. Whereas I think as creators, sometimes we get too caught up on the platform we're making something for. And so I think the future of really strong, sustainable brands are the ones that are content agnostic, platform agnostic, and really have a core, strong idea at the middle of them, so they can connect to the fans or the users that we're trying to engage in the first place.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting, Alex, from your perspective, obviously the antithesis of what you're seeing with kind of people coming to watch other people play games is very much the evolution of what we're seeing with this digital generation. So I'm curious from your perspective whether you see that as purely a digital future, or as you say, you're having these live events where you're seeing people in massive arenas come and sit and watch people essentially consume entertainment. Do you think this is the way forward?
I think it's about a new way to be entertained. Well, as I said, we began our adventure on YouTube, so we posted content, and we didn't even know that people would be coming to watch it. Thanks to YouTube and that kind of streaming platforms, today you can emerge in a way that was not possible before. Before you had to go through a production label that maybe would say this is good or this is bad, or you have to compromise. Today you don't need to compromise. You can be a whole, you can be yourself, and usually YouTubers that find success are the ones that stay themselves, and that's for me really intriguing, and I don't really know what's going to happen in the future, because it's very new that you can make content that pleases you, and people see it and it pleases them because they see you having pleasure doing it and earning money too, and you can sustain an activity on YouTube or on Twitch without having to go through those old school way of financing stuff. And finally, to answer your question, our generation likes and needs, and they won't go for something else, interactivity, so likes, comment and share obviously, but they also like to meet in the places, and it's really a social generation. They are not just accepting content through their computer, they want to participate, and they wanna create with the content producers, yes.
Bearing in mind that this audience is probably very music focused, I think it might be worth just giving some context in terms of what the value of your market is, and what the value of a player like Twitch is at this moment in time.
Twitch is it's a streaming platform that was originally called Justin TV. Justin TV was built by a couple of guys in San Francisco, I think, and they opened this small thing called Twitch TV that was dedicated to gaming. Justin TV was about anything, and in 3 years it went from 0 to 100 million users per month. It just got bought by Amazon for $1,000 billion, July 2014, and it allows you to stream whatever you want, mainly gaming, but now you can also see artists going for boiler room-like content, like producing sound, mixing, DJs. You also find poker, which is always in the corner, and yeah, it's bigger than NBC and BBC primetime now.
To give some context, certainly Twitch is the third largest user of video streaming in the US, so that gives you some context in terms of the size of what the kind of market is that we're talking about. So in terms of revenue, and obviously the advertising revenue available on a platform like Twitch, it's quite significant. We haven't really talked yet about revenues yet and what the future of revenues might look like in this context, but I'm curious, Lisa, to hear from your perspective. We were talking earlier about the potential for new types of revenue, but more about the potential for new types of technology in this context of music and game and where we're going next. And we talked about very specifically VR, because I don't think anybody's quite figured that out yet, and we haven't quite got to what the revenue models on something like that might be.
I think the next year is going to be very interesting in VR. I mean, personally, about a year ago, I was a bit, cynical about it, but I've been fortunate enough in the last 2 months to start working with Samsung and Oculus Rift technology, and really getting an opportunity to tell stories and experience that immersive world, and jokingly and joke with some of my colleagues about how, wow, we could create a world where you don't have to take the headset off at all. But I know that there's going to be a really big push in that market in the next year, and those kind of platforms will be looking for content. And I think the different ways that it can help the user or the audience connect with especially with music is going to be quite extraordinary in terms of a full immersive environment. And the technology is starting to get cheaper. Like, I think Samsung just said that they're releasing an ability to, better than Google Cardboard, that's going to be available, I think, as £100 or something.
Sounds about right. But Cardboard's only £20, give or take.
Yeah, but the technology's okay.
Might as well dance the mobile that you're inserting into the cardboard box.
I know. When you look at it that way, and you're like, it is inserting some getting cardboard in your mobile and stuff. But and it will get better. But I think what's exciting for me is there's a real push to improve the technology, and it's starting to really show its potential. And so that means the storytelling is going to be exciting. Like we were saying, that I was writing a documentary script for VR, and then I was like, wow, I have to write this differently. I have to write it more like a song because it's a stream of consciousness. And so the creative challenge of adapting to that universe compared to the other platforms I've made content for is really, really exciting.
In fact, I saw an interesting headline, I think it was actually this morning, saying that the recent experiment by the NBL was more successful than the actual political debates on American TV on the morning that they tried to do that. So when you think about that, a VR experiment for a sporting event was more successful than people watching a political debate on TV. So when we think about what the future is and what that future technology could be, what's your perspective? Do you think it's going to move to VR for you?
Can you explain VR to me?
Virtual reality. So
okay, sorry.
Sorry.
So virtual reality versus reality. Is it the question?
When you have arena events and people are coming in, they're sitting down, they're watching somebody play the sport. So the NBL had a version of that. Obviously, they have their big sports event, but they actually put it onto VR. So for people who couldn't be there to watch the playoffs, they could put a little headset on their head. They could watch it, in virtual reality instead. And more people chose to watch that than they did necessarily to watch a political debate, which will influence the future of their country. They chose instead to watch some people playing basketball in VR.
Yeah, it reminds me of Bill Gates said that tomorrow luxury should be the ability to live someone else's life. And I think that's also what gaming is about interactive entertainment. So you take part in a movie, for example, you will be the main character. Who wouldn't prefer, when you watch Indiana Jones, who wouldn't prefer to be Indiana Jones rather than just watching the movie? I think that's also why video games are conquering the whole entertainment industry. And that's a fantasy, to be able to do whatever you want, maybe to live the life of whoever you want. Today with 5G connection and the miniaturization of cameras, we could be streaming with your glasses this conference, and people all over the world would be living your life, Tanya.
Come on, Shane, get on it.
How does that make you feel?
I think one of the most exciting statistics I heard at Power of the Pixel a couple of weeks ago was that when the United Nations did the VR experience, that 1 in 6 people after experiencing the refugee VR experience donated after that. And I think that just says a lot. And, there's one thing to be said of, being completely immersed in entertainment for hours and hours and hours on end. And I have definitely done that myself. But when you hear about how technology can create that kind of money transaction for such an amazing cause, I think that's really exciting.
I think it might be worth talking a little bit about the context of VR, because I know that we're using lovely phrases like VR and people may not necessarily understand how that applies to the music industry. So let me give you some context. Right now, nobody's figured this out. Nobody knows quite how to create content for VR that's going to be productive, commercially viable, or enjoyable to watch. Most people suffer from motion sickness when they use VR. They haven't quite nailed that one down yet. But the interesting things that we do know about VR is that short-form content is king. So 5 to 10 minutes is about the maximum that you're going to really be able to tolerate a decent VR experience. And when we think about things like music videos and the length of a good music video, we're talking about the same kind of lengths. When we talk about artistic creation and the way that people shoot a music video, it lends itself really well to things like VR, because VR doesn't conform to typical filming methodologies. So you can't have your typical director's cut or your typical director's zoom in or any of those other things that people might normally do in traditional film. Whereas for a long, long time now in music video directors haven't conformed to filming standards anyway. They've broken new ground, they've tried new things, they've been able to experiment and explore. So actually, VR is a really interesting place for music directors and for music content to really experiment. The other really interesting aspect for VR, of course, is being able to just stick a 360 camera in the middle of a concert and be able to allow people to experience the entirety of that concert without actually necessarily physically being there. So I think perhaps it was worth explaining that in the context of why we're so interested in VR and what we think it means for the music industry, because I do think there are a lot of different applications potentially for the music industry, and it's worth exploring what those applications are. But one of the other areas of interest that we spoke about earlier was about the evolution, if you like, of the fact that you kind of mentioned about technology getting cheaper and the ability to publish becoming more accessible. And we're in a stage now where actually anybody can pull out, you know, that lovely little box in their back pocket called a smartphone and create content and publish that content to the whole big bad world out there. So what does that mean for us in terms of we have, you know, a music industry that wants to be able to reach out to this audience, and the way that the audience communicate is very different now. They expect, as you say, interactivity. They expect to be able to not just be broadcast at, but to interact with that content.
There is this interactivity that is central. You can also look at with a global perspective where today, as you said, it's possible for an artist, maybe a game designer or a musician, to produce without compromise. So maybe you'll discover that the Tibetan dude is super skilled in playing violin, you don't know. And with this technology getting accessible, he can exist as a whole, as a person. He will be this musician, and maybe he will conquer the hearts of people, maybe a little bit of people all over the world that will build his community. And you have this, I think it's really strong concept in our generation, which is you become, you can become through Facebook, through social networks, through YouTube, through iTunes. You can be a personality, and you can make friends that, or fans, or build a community that you couldn't, impossible to anticipate before. You can live. You can be. You can make money. You can enable your art to exist, even if you're doing something super niche, super precise, but if it pleases a number of people all over the world, then you can do what you want. You can be who you want to be.
Absolutely. I know that you've got some views and thoughts on people like Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber in terms of the way they're interacting with their audiences via social media.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, to make content effective or entertaining, you need to have a respectful relationship with who you're making it for. I think gone are the days where the content makers and the experts knew best, and I think we've got to really keep front and centre that the generation that we're making a lot of this music content for have always grown up with online and the ability to communicate, and you need to make sure that your audience feels like they're being heard. One of the tricks I learned very early days of doing interviewing bands was I worked for a mobile company in Australia, and I had like a day to research interviewing someone like Taylor Swift or Pink, and I'd be like, oh, this is really hard to get all my information together because I'm not a fan. And then one day it occurred to me, I went, hang on, why don't I put this out to the platform? Hey, I'm interviewing Taylor Swift tomorrow. What questions should I ask her? Then suddenly some really great information came back. And then I was able to walk into that interview and go, look, here are the top 5 questions from fans. This was like 11, 12 years ago now, so I know everyone is doing this. And then not only did I have really good quality questions, but because it was her fan base talking directly to her, their answers were great. I made really good content, and then I was providing the service that I needed to for the audience that I was attracting. So I think it's really important, but at the same time, you also respect what skill set you're bringing into making this content. I have made the mistakes where I've gone, great, user-generated content, let's throw out and you can make whatever you want, and the stuff I get back hasn't been so great. So when you have the right parameters in there and you help guide the audience to what you need and collectively make the content, you can make some really great stuff in the community. So going back to, we were talking about how the success of a lot of pop artists have to do with how they're interacting with their audience and how they're communicating and how they're collectively living within a world under a certain ethos that artist is creating. And that's why it's really important that you make it feel like your audience that you're making content for is being heard.
Do you think there is such a thing as a music artist these days who cannot be interacting with their audience via social media? Alex?
I guess it's part of it. Depends what their shtick is. You know, if there's, and then I guess their fan base would respect that. So that's why, you know, going back to our earlier point about platforms. You know, I think to be quite a successful cut-through brand these days, it's about what your message is, and then thinking about what platforms you communicate it on. And if there is a artist that part of their ethos is not communicating in that way and they don't use it, then, and that's true to what they stand for, then that's what they could do. But then if there's bigger commercial successes, they are all using their socials to communicate.
But do you think it's an expectation from the audience that that band should be there?
I definitely think for the younger audience, because they've always grown up with the ability to talk and the ability to communicate directly or have that connection. So in that case it is, and the world that we live in and the connectivity it is as well. But it's going to be really interesting to see how that matures. That, you know, we were talking earlier about how, you know, gone are the days of, wow, how exciting, online, new tech, you know, all this kind of stuff. But as we grow up with it, how we will use it in order to engage our audiences and ensure that we can continue to make really strong entertainment properties.
So from your perspective, do you think that social collaboration is a way forward, bearing in mind that when people come, they're coming to observe, they're coming to consume the content, they're not necessarily coming to talk to each other, or do you think they are?
You mean building and creating something with the fan base?
Yeah, you spoke earlier about communities.
Yeah, I think that's the one solution for artists to be able to produce now is also through Kickstarters, crowdfunding. Once your Tibetan violinist is known and his YouTube video is buzzing, he has the possibility to go further and to make his fan base be more engaged through crowdfunding and to build projects from online and virtual content that
It's interesting that you mentioned crowdfunding because it's one of those common myths that crowdfunding is a place to go to get money, and the reality is that crowdfunding really isn't a place to go and get money. Crowdfunding is a place to go when you already have an audience. It's not a place to gain the audience, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand the difference between those things. But I think it is a great place when you have the audience and you want to mobilize them. It's definitely the place to go. But I'm curious from your perspective, obviously you've spoken about the Digital Cities project that you've done previously with Power to the Pixel, and that notion of collaborative content, or what some people might call as UGC, or user-generated content, might be a way forwards for people in terms of artists and in terms of creativity and the way that people create content that is relevant to their audience. Do you think this is something that people will become more open to going forwards?
I'm a big believer in collaboration. That's just at my heart. And I know that, and I know there's some artists out there that prefer to work singularly, and there's some artists that prefer to, but I know that is a big part of who I am. I do think for mass movements, and I think when you have the right concept at the core of it, collectively you can make some really great work, but I think it's really important to have a vision at the centre of it. I do believe in people power, but I think people wouldn't follow that ideology unless there was something there. I think that's really, really important. One of the most exciting things about that Power to the Pixel project was the ability to collaborate with creatives outside of your fields or your genres. I get really excited by that. I created a project with an architect, an artist from an 80s band, an artist from a band now, and MIT University, and it was a soundtrack of the world where we got real-world data algorithms that were saying births now and deaths now and synthesising it with music stems to make a livable soundtrack. So it was really kind of out there, but it was just articulating if there was a soundtrack in the world right now, this is what it would sound like. And writing the Bible for that project was pretty intense. Even the different languages that the band from the 80s and the band from now were using, I just realised there were differences but similarities, and we had to have a Bible of communication at the core of it in order to make sure we were making the best project we could. Or even the concept of a live music feed, that if there was some disaster, the music track would change, and that was beyond our control. But it was a collaboration of data to tell a story with music. So it was, I do think there's a lot of, and I guess we were doing it because it hadn't been done before, and that was a way to kind of get the attention of the audience that we were trying to attract. And also the creative challenge of it was exciting to see what it would sound like. And I think we need people in the industry who are going to continue to experiment, with creativity in order to see where we end up. Sometimes the experiments don't sound that great, and sometimes they work, so.
It's all about the execution.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
So I'm curious, because this panel is interestingly titled Music Futures. I'm interested to understand what you think will be the future for your industry, so specifically for esports and e-gaming. What do you think is going to be the future for your industry, and what do you think is going to be the technology or the cultural shift that's going to really have an impact on what you do?
So there are two main things. So gaming as a whole is what we know is it's huge. Everybody plays here. I suppose 70% of French people, I don't know about Spanish, but they play video games on a regular basis. And there is I was thinking this morning about a funky story, which is the one of Flappy Bird. I don't know if you guys heard it or played it, but Flappy Bird was developed by a Taiwanese guy. He was alone. It was a really simple game, and you just had to poke the screen so the bird would flap and then survive maybe or not. And it was a super frustrating game because his gameplay was very frustrating. But a lot of people played, and in 2 weeks there was 3 million downloads of this game made by a Taiwanese guy in his room. And he got bigger than many games you could find on the market or whatever. However, the game lasted not more than 3 more weeks. It was shut down by this guy who went super rich with this Flappy Bird game because he earned a lot of money, but he was not here for that. And he cancelled the game, he shut down the game because he got too many negative feedbacks about frustration and death letters and people saying you're shit, your game is shit.
Gamers are nice people, honest.
Sorry?
I said gamers are nice people, honest.
But I think that's any cultural product that goes mainstream has this counterpart where I don't know why, but some people want to kill you. Like I'm sure Red Hot Chili Peppers, they also get death letters. Anybody that gets fame also gets haters, and the haters gonna hate, and you are not supposed to really listen to them. But this guy, he went from this little developer in his room to someone loved or hated by 3 million people, and in 1 month, and he couldn't handle it. And he canceled the game saying, I didn't make this game to frustrate people, so I'm just gonna shut it down. And that's maybe not the future of gaming, but that's an interesting story, both in the ability for this guy to develop solo a very mainstream and played game,
big,
and as well what you can get with a rapid success, and if you're not prepared for it, and if it doesn't grow slowly, and you evolve also mentally with it, with success, is that it can ruin things.
So the takeaway there is that overnight success is perhaps not always a good thing.
Yes.
Okay, and Lisa, your final word.
I think the future of what we're talking about is really growing your relationship with your audience and having a respectful one, because I think a lot of people fear user-generated content or interactivity, thinking that the audience want to be the musicians or want to be the content makers or want to be the ones who are making games. But there are a lot of audience out there that are actually just looking for a good game and looking for a good piece of content and music, and the more we get to know our relationship rather than fear it, because for a long time as content creators we used to just tell you what you liked, and then people used to sit back. The more we get to know that, I think we're going to make better content, and we're going to make more entertaining and long-term properties that are going to exist and not get someone so upset that they're going to quit and not be creative anymore. So yeah, because I guess for me in that scenario, like, you know, I work with a lot of young startups and up-and-comings, and I would have, you know, if there was someone there with that person, they would have been able to help them through that, and they would be continuing to make that. So it's about understanding where we all fit in the creative cosmos, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm going to close with one final word for the people in the room who are purely from the music industry and not from the games industry. I will say this, that the games industry is one of the largest growing industries, and when it comes to technology and the emergence and evolution of technology, the games industry is probably one of the industries that is most rapidly exploring what's coming next. And they believe in throwing out, you know, minimum viable product and starting with something rather than sitting around and hoping that somebody else is going to do that. So if you're looking for relationships with people who are going to be exploring those new frontiers, whether that's new platforms or new revenue models, the games industry is very much there to be your friend and your partner in doing so.